no stranger to open and invitational success himself, Andrew Tenjum, who had, I believe, at least one invitational top 8 last season, and a plethora of good finishes in the Open Series as well.
Yeah, he was the finalist in Somerset. He ended up losing to Eric Smith in the finals. Tenjum was playing Naya. Smith was playing Jund, because Jund is so much fun. But Tenjum, as you see there, he is 8th right now on the leaderboard. As far as Open Series points are concerned. So you've got the 8 versus the 11 here for this weekend. Two players who are obviously very accomplished on the Open Series circuit. Again, chasing those points, trying to qualify for the Players' Championship as they are having fun rolling dice here to see who's going to play first. We'll find out who that is momentarily. But Tenjum is playing a deck I actually never have seen him play before in Storm.
Ad nauseum tendrils, for those of you not that familiar with the Legacy format, when people talk about the busted decks of Legacy, this is one of them, capable of killing turn 2, sometimes even turn 1 with its best draws unopposed. Occasionally susceptible to things like Force of Will and Daze and Spell Pierce, but very powerful, explosive deck.
So we're going to see a fair deck versus unfair deck. This is kind of what defines Legacy here. Yep. Sometimes you see combo decks trying to race each other. Sometimes you see fair decks, playing really long games against each other. But oftentimes you're going to see a fair deck against an unfair deck, and the fair deck trying to keep it in check before it ends up dying.
Yeah, and we see, like you said, that sort of dichotomy occurring a lot. Most decks in Legacy can be boiled down to, I'm trying to do something very explosive, or I'm trying to prevent you from taking actions.
Yes.
With some mixture of, Daze and Wasteland, Stifle and Force of Will, or a bunch of Duresses and Thoughtseizes, or a bunch of Mana Denial in other ways. And Owen is definitely in that class of deck. Yep. A lot of soft permission, Wastelands, and a quick clock. And Andrew certainly in the first camp of being one of the decks trying to do something very explosive.
Now, of course, you guys can join us all weekend long at SCG Live, hashtag SCGINDY, for your tweets as we make our way through these last 6 rounds of Legacy action. Before we do go to our elimination rounds and work our way towards crowning a champion, we'll be checking it all weekend long, also at Cedric A. Phillips and at Basic Mountain for your personal tweets. If you want to make fun of Patrick and I, you can certainly do that there. As we are going to make our way through Legacy here. Again, we took the first 3 rounds off, but we're going to start here in round number 4. These two players off to a fantastic start, but the big story here is if Turtenwald can actually run the back-to-back.
It would be pretty impressive.
Yeah, I think that would be a lot of fun to watch, actually. So the former Player of the Year is off to a great start. Again, winning the Standard Open with Mono Black Devotion, the deck that he used to win Grand Prix Albuquerque, and trying to win this Legacy Open with the deck that he used to win Grand Prix Washington, D.C. As Tenjum is going to start with a Flooded Strand to get our Legacy action started.
Finds Underground Sea. Likely to be either a Duress or a Ponder on the first turn.
Or, kill you.
Possibly kill you. On a 6-card hand, that's mighty difficult.
Certainly bold, too, as you can only imagine, as here's a Ponder on the first turn, so a little bit of manipulation. Tenjum is obviously someone who is well-informed with the metagames and the players and all that stuff, so you have to imagine that he knows that Turtenwald is probably just playing blue at Red Delver. Hard to get off of a deck that you win a Grand Prix with.
And the same deck that I played in the Invitational also. And very close to Owen 75.
How did we do there?
Not quite the same results.
It just sounds like you were unlucky.
I wouldn't say that.
Tenjum looks like he's going to lead off his turn with a Brainstorm, potentially. He's going to start with a Swamp, and now he's going to Brainstorm. So he's got a Cabal Ritual in his hand. He also has an Infernal Tutor. Turtenwald might consider Spell Piercing this, but he's going to give it a go. So Brainstorm's going to resolve. 2 and 3. Ad Nauseam, Lion's Eye Diamond, and an additional Brainstorm are the cards that are drawn.
This is a very powerful hand that Tenjum has.
Yes,
I mean, this is capable of, if he was confident that he was unopposed, he would be capable of killing as early as next turn. But obviously a Tundra represents a lot of potential disruption, and Tenjum's going to try to set this up with a little bit of duressing first before trying to go off.
See if Turtenwald's going to cast a Brainstorm. I wouldn't be surprised maybe to see a Daze here on the Duress as well. We could even see a Spell Pierce here. And he says, all right, here's my grip. I've got 2 Brainstorms, a Daze, Misty Rainforest, Flooded Strand, Swords of Plowshares, and a Volcanic Island.
So Owen could have done some Brainstorm shenanigans or dazed it, but instead said, fine, go ahead. Owen may not be working with enough information quite yet to know what to fight over, so just happy to let it resolve.
All right, so Brainstorm's going to go away. Turtenwald's going to start his turn by Brainstorming. So It's going to resolve. There's a Scalding Tarn, there's a Force of Will, and there's a Mr. Rainforest. So Force of Will obviously being the most important card that he's found here. Especially when Tenjum just made you discard and took a look at your hand and didn't see Force of Will prior.
But all this manipulation and finding some soft permission, that's all well and good. But if you've ever seen Ant in action, or a lot of the combo decks of Legacy, you can't just sit on one counterspell the whole game. These decks between duresses or their own counterspells, whatever the case may be, are capable of overpowering one counterspell or one duress effect or what have you. So you need a mixture of these counterspells or other forms of disruption combined with some pressure. So
Alright, take a draw. Lionside Diamond's in the grip. I don't know if he's willing to try to go for it. I mean, he's got a Brainstorm. He can still set up a little bit more. And there's a Brainstorm. And we know there's a Duress hiding out on top. That's the first card he's going to draw. The next two are going to be a Mystery. It's a Bloodstained Mire and a Preordain. And actually, excuse me, the Ad Nauseam is the other card that he put back. So I apologize for that.
you can pretty safely put back that Ad Nauseam, as that will likely be his, potentially an Infernal True target if he decides to go that route.
Fortunately for Tenjum, he did draw a fetch land, so he's not going to get Brainstorm locked. Here he can actually put a couple cards back and, clear out the top of his deck and try to go for the combo here. The problem here for him is that Turtenwald did draw that Force of Will. Again, I don't know if he's going to move in or not this turn because it's kind of appealing to want to do that. You see his hand right now, the way that he has it loaded up. He's got Cabal Rituals ×2. He's got the Lion's Eye Diamond, and he has the copy of Infernal Tutor. So it looks like he would want to go for it very soon.
Although it's possible Tenjum's happy to be in something of a holding pattern as long as Owen's not applying any pressure. There's no need to try to go off through a Force of Will right now if Owen's not making you do anything, because you have additional duresses or other cards that allow you to have more information or a better chance of going off through a piece of disruption. So
yeah, I mean, I don't really like making a move much at all, honestly. You know, at this point, Turnwald's not doing anything. If there's a Delver Secrets out there, or some sort of clock, then I would want to move. But I think Tenjum can actually just sit here as long as he wants to and just keep setting up, keep, brainstorming and doing all these other things. Now that a Delver has shown up, now you actually may want to get the ball rolling. But again, he's sitting at 19. 19 is a whole lot.
yes.
So, there's really no pressure at this point. Even, Tenjum could afford to take 3 or 4 hits from this. And then decide, okay, now it's time to lead off with the Cabal Therapy or Duress and try to go off, because at this point you've probably drawn a Force of Will. Oh, I'm being told right now on Twitter, it's actually Winterstorm Ion. That's the name of our Winterstorm. That's what's attacking us.
It does still sound like a Dr. Doomsian
yeah, it really
sort
does.
of plot device.
It's some sort of comic book villain. So you see a Preordain. Both are going to go to the bottom very quickly for Tenjum, so certainly not what he was looking for. Now he's going to take a draw. Finds a Polluted Delta. More lands is not what he needs right now. I think all he needs right now to comfortably go off is a discard spell.
Yeah. Owen's had a lot of draw steps plus a Brainstorm that, Tenjum's unaware of. He's now under a little bit of pressure, that Delver, particularly if it flips, but he can still wait a little bit longer. He still may want to make his move.
I just don't think he can confidently make a move at this point. When Turtenwald has so many cards in hand, yeah, you have an idea of what some of them are, but without a second Infernal Tutor or something like that, it's so easy for this to just go poorly. It feels like.
And Tenjum's hand is so loaded, he just needs to clear out Force of Will,
Yeah.
and
again, it's a situation where there's no pressure, and that's the thing that I don't particularly like about what looks like an attempt to go off here, is that he's not underneath any pressure and the clock isn't going to speed up. Let's say the worst case scenario, Delver just flips immediately. It's like, okay, 15, 12, 9. Now I have to be worried of lightning bolts hitting me. Okay, now now I don't want to go off anymore. Or, now I have to actually go off, excuse me. Where it's like he's sitting at 18.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't really think that there's that much of a rush at this point. And he only has to play around Daze because that's the only card that he saw. But you have to imagine that, something happened here where Owen Turtenwald probably drew something. And now here's an Infernal Tutor. You see he's going to count. With on the stack, he might blow the LED. And he's going to do that. It's going to be bad news bears here for him. If he is going to blow, I mean, even if he doesn't blow the LED, it's still going to be bad news bear because he's all in at this point. As Turtenwald's going to check to see exactly what's going on in the graveyard. Inferno Tutor's on the stack, and Force of Will's going to take care of that.
Oh.
So now Tenjum has to completely rebuild.
And that's a very challenging thing to do from this place.
Yeah, again, because it's very likely that Delver will flip this turn or the next, even though Turtenwald doesn't have a setup here to make sure it's going to flip. Surprise, surprise, that it does. There's a Spell Pierce, which is going to make things obviously more difficult for Tenjum. Turtenwald has to decide if he wants to draw that card or not, because he can sacrifice his Misty Rainforest before he does draw a card. You know, how good does he think the Spell Pierce is right now? Clearly not very, so he's going to cycle that away.
Although Spell Pierce doesn't seem like the worst card to draw there, as Tenjum rebuilding still involves him casting Passive Flames or Ad Nauseam sometime in the relatively near future. But Owen decides against.
Yeah, I think we're just going to, I don't know exactly what Owen's looking for. Wasteland's not a bad start, so he can constrict the mana a little bit. Going to start by attacking with Insectile Aberration here for 3. Turtenwald going to play Wasteland, get the Underground Sea out of here, and pass the turn back. So Tenjum's going to draw a card, and he's just going to pass back. And we're going to see this for a couple of turns here. Might not be very long, though, because Tenjum is under attack here, as Turtenwald's going to start his turn off with a Brainstorm. There's a Pierce, a Swords, and another copy of Wasteland. Pretty easy just to put the Swords back, as they're not going to play a big role in this matchup. They'll almost certainly get sideboarded out as well. Attack here from 3 in the air, going to put Tenjum down to 12. Don't forget about the Bolt in Turtenwald's hand as well. So, basically, Tenjum is at a virtual 9 life right now. Another Bolt speeds up the clock another turn, too, as Turtenwald's going to sacrifice that Scalding Turn on his upkeep, so he does not draw either one of those Swords to Plowshares, hopefully.
And you can see the blue-white red deck being very lean and efficient.
Yes.
There's not a lot of wasted activity here,
No,
that's
not
for
at
sure. Brainstorms, efficient removal, efficient creatures.
Nothing crazy. Stuff we've seen in Legacy for a while now. Here's another attack for 3. Going to put Tenjum down to 9. Virtual 6 due to that Bolt. Play a Wasteland. Turtenwald does have a 5-man now, so he can represent a hard cast Force of Will. And Tenjum's going to cast Cataxian Probe. Not going to pay the 2 life. Turtenwald, looking at a Spell Pierce in his hand, says that's fine. You see a Spell Pierce, you see a Flooded Strand, and a Lightning Bolt. So now Tenjum knows that he's actually at that virtual 6, and he has one less turn to mess around with. However, can he overcome that Spell Pierce? He does have a Cabal Therapy in his hand. Turtenwald draws a card.
And a Lion's Eye Diamond. I mean, he's got something of a structure to go off with.
His last card's Dark Ritual, too, so he's actually doing okay, as Turtenwald's going to play the Flood Strand that Tenjum didn't know about. He just needs a card to go off with, and he draws a Polluted Delta, which is not the card he needs.
I mean, it's possible if Infernal Tutor is his draw there that he can actually...
It's very possible.
Actually make that happen.
Yes. You see Cabal Therapy is going to get cast here. And the fun little decision point here is, is Turtenwald going to bolt him or not? And the answer is, yeah, he is. Because there's a chance that if he lets it resolve, Tenjum's actually going to name Bolt, not Spell Pierce, so he doesn't die. But now Tenjum's at 3. I think Owen's going to say, you can name Spell Pierce, I guess, or do I actually cast a Spell Pierce because it's going to contribute to your Storm count? And he says, no, I'm not, you got that. And Tenjum is going to concede the game, using that Cabal Therapy for a little bit of information. So Owen Turtenwald is going to win game number 1 here over Andrew Tenjum. Blue, white, red, Delver up a game over Ant as we move along to the sideboard.
And this is, these blue, white, red decks, Rug Delver, these are the type of decks that they're supposed to prey on. The mixture of cheap Disruption and cheap clocks and Force of Will is supposed to be a really good recipe for fighting the combo decks like Sneak and Show and Ad Nauseam. And we saw it play out that way in the first game. So moving on to the sideboard, Andrew has access to Xanted Swarm and Carpet of Flowers, both of which are reasonable cards to bring in. The issue, of course, is that there's only so much wiggle room that a deck like Ad Nauseam has, because it needs to keep in its density of rituals and cantrips and cards to actually go off with. So I would expect him to select one or the other of these cards. I would probably err towards Carpet of Flowers because of the presence of Lightning Bolt in Owen's deck.
Over here on Turtenwald's side, you're not going to find any real surprises if you're familiar with his list from winning Grand Prix Albuquerque. You've got 4 copies of Meddling Mage, 2 Pyroblast, 1 Red Elemental Blast, 2 Rest in Peace, 2 Grim Lavamancer, a True Nemesis, a Sulfur Elemental, a Sword of Feast and Famine, and a Grafdigger's Cage. What he gets to do here is he gets to sideboard in a lot of cards in this matchup. Meddling Mage is fantastic, providing a nice clock, a card to remove Force of Will, and it's a card that Tenjum actually has to get off of the board to be able to go off, depending on when Turtenwald does decide to name. 2 copies of Pyroblast and a Red Elemental Blast. Those are okay in this particular matchup. Actually, countering the cantrips isn't so bad because it's really important for a deck like Ad Nauseam Tendrils to have those cantrips. Now, I don't know if you want a high density of them, but bringing those in is certainly okay. 2 copies of Rest in Peace. This is the real backbreaker because in this particular matchup, more often than not, Tenjum is going to use the Past in Flames kill to kill the opponent. That, of course, requires the Graveyard, which Rest in Peace is going to blow up. It's very difficult for him to be able to win with Ad Nauseam against a deck that wants to press you with Delver, Meddling Mage after sideboard, and Lightning Bolts. So he's not going to have, 20 life to work with.
Right.
That's not going to be the case. So Rest in Peace is actually going to be quite good here. Lavamancer, more for a combo Elves type matchup. True Nemesis, much too slow in this particular matchup. Same can be said of Sulfur Elemental. Sword of Feast and Famine, something that he's probably going to want to search up with Stoneforge Mystic as opposed to Batterskull. And then the Singleton Grafdigger's Cage is the only card left in the board here. So he's got a lot of options against combo.
Yes.
Yeah.
And his game one's very solid as well.
Yeah. And I really think that one of the things that's going to be tough here for Tenjum is that the clock does speed up, and you have to kind of dodge some of the sideboard cards. But what makes the sideboard good here from the Blue-Red Delver deck is that the composition of sideboard cards, they all accomplish the same thing of making it difficult for Tenjum to go off, but they do it in very different ways.
And I think this is fundamentally the problem that decks like Ad Nauseam have in the format. I think a lot of people just test game ones. You're very rarely playing the post-board games. And every deck that does not have Force of Will, usually very easy to beat. And even the decks that do have Force of Will, you're playing against Stoneblade or decks that just have Force of Will to protect themselves, you can beat those decks a good percentage of the time too. So you have a perception of the deck just being free wins against non-Force of Will decks and still very good against Force of Will decks. But the post-board games where decks like Blue, White, Red Delver get to cut their creature removal, some of their cards like True Name Nemesis, their inefficient Stoneforge Mystic targets, and get to bring in more powerful disruption and pressure, make the matchups go from even or slightly bad to far worse. And decks like Ad Nauseam can't sideboard that many cards because they had to keep their density of cantrips and rituals and all that kind of stuff going on. So your post-board matches almost invariably get worse.
Again, Tenjum on the left, he's going to be on the play this particular go-around. Things are going to be pretty tough for him. Now, of course, when you're dealing with a deck as powerful as Ad Nauseam Tendrils, your opponent can bring all the hate in that they want to. You still have the capability to go off on turn 1 or turn 2 before they can deploy any of it and power through a Force of Will, depending on how your draw lines up. So even though things do look grim for him right now, it is certainly possible for him to kill Turtenwald very, very quickly. If Turtenwald's hands do not line up appropriately, we won't even have 2 relevant games. Here's a Cataxian Probe to start things off. And this is kind of one of those hands, it feels like, where you've got a Ponder, you've got a Daze, there's a Spell Pierce, there's a Red Elemental Blast, and a couple of lands. So, if he makes it alive through the first turn, which is likely, Turtenwald will be able to interact. But this is a good probe, I think, for Tenjum to see. There's a Dark Ritual at the top. I wonder if that comes into play here. It's going to get interesting.
And I have been killed from this spot before.
Yeah, so have I. I can't say I've been the one doing the killing from this spot because much too dumb to play with Storm correctly, but I've been killed from this spot. Here's a Volcanic Island, and Turtenwald going to pass the turn back. And it does kind of beg the question if it was correct to cast that Brainstorm right away if you're Tenjum. The reason being is if he does cast a Brainstorm to start his turn, I would bet a significant amount that Turtenwald fires off the Red Blast.
Tenjum's going to leave. And to me, this, if you're not going to follow this up with anything, it feels like that Brainstorm is too critical to just let Owen curve into his removal. You need to kind of overload his disruption, so I'd be loath to just cast that critical cantrip into his open mana like that.
Yeah, I feel the exact same way.
Owen's not doing anything. You saw his hand is just a cantrip and some soft permission, so you can wait a little while too.
I also think that it's actually really important for him to actually cast the Brainstorm as soon as he sees the Red Elemental Blast. It's obviously not exciting to cast Brainstorm on turn 1, but there's such a high likelihood that he's just going to use the Red Blast to counter it because realistically, what other blue spells do I have in my deck that are worth countering the Red Blast?
Right.
Brainstorm, you could argue, is the best one, but I think he's going to fire it off on any cantrip. Here's a Meddling Mage off the top for Turtenwald. So Chris Pakula is in play, and we'll see what he will not allow Tenjum to cast.
I know a lot of players in this spot just default to Dark Ritual, but if Owen has if Owen thinks he can craft a game plan where he can shut out Andrew's ways of going off one by one, then he can afford to allow him to cast the rituals, of course.
Inferno Tutor is the card that is named on that Meddling Mage, so now Turtenwald's going to start his turn 3 with a Ponder, so a little bit of manipulation here, as he finds a Force of Will, a Pyroblast, and a Delver of Secrets, so not a bad 3 cards to be looking at.
Yeah, that is a loaded set of cards.
And this is the thing that gets really scary again after sideboard, is that not only does Turtenwald have a lot of hate cards, and you can find them with Brainstorm and Ponder, but there's it's almost gets to the point where because he has such a high density, his Ponders and Brainstorms, none of them are going to look bad. He's always going to be able to find what he needs because his entire deck is full of things that he wants to find.
Tenjum has just picked up a Ponder, but I strongly suspect Owen is not going to let this resolve.
Yep, this feels like a nice daze target. Tenjum looks like he may want to cast a Lotus Petal here, but he's not entirely sure, so he is going to cast a Lotus Petal. Now this is something that oftentimes is going to contribute to Storm Count, but now he's doing this so he can cast a Ponder. And again, even though he did cast a Lotus Petal, I think that it's certainly worth dazing this to get that Lotus Petal off the board.
Yeah, that's a fine trade to make, I think, if you're Owen.
And Tenjum says, all right, I'm going to pay. And now there's a Spell Pierce. So again, fighting over the cantrips is something I really, really like that Turtenwald's doing in this game because, again, the cantrips are so important. It basically forces the Ant player to draw perfect.
Yeah.
If they don't get to mess around with their cantrips and find Contaxia Probes and Cabal Therapies and set themselves up, it's so hard for them to win it. It forces their hand for their draw steps to be actual perfect. And that's not even taking into account the fact that Turtenwald's draw steps have to be bad.
Yep. And I like using both the counters there because, if you're in Owen's position, who knows what hell could be unleashed if Andrew finds black mana.
Yeah.
Owen's clock is not great here, so there's a risk certainly of him being able to go off even through a Force of Will right now if he were to find black mana.
Well, he's going to increase the clock because now here's Delver of Secrets. See, Inferno Tutor is the card that was drawn on the previous turn there for Tenjum, but Meddling Mage is not going to allow that to be cast. And there is a Lotus Petal, so Tenjum does have access to black mana right now. Turtenwald says that's fine. That's going to resolve, and Tenjum's going to pass the turn back, so you didn't have to discard. Force of Will is going to turn over the Delver of Secrets into an Insectile Aberration. I don't think we're going to shuffle that one away.
No, that one will do.
Scalding Tarn. And you see a hand right now for Turtenwald. He's got 2 forces, another blue card, which he's going to cast in Ponder, and a Pyroblast. He's going to do some manipulation with Ponder. He'll see another Ponder, a Wasteland, and a Brainstorm.
So he has a blue card to replace the one he just got rid of. I mean, you can see Owen is still taking his time and mulling this one over. This is not a locked game by any stretch, as good as his draw has been and as much as Andrew's been fumbling around.
Decisions. I think he wants to keep this. I feel like he kind of wants to keep this on top. But Brainstorm is obviously powerful, especially when he has a fetch land in play. But I think he just wants a blue card for Force of Will. Yeah. Like, he has a blue card because he has 2 Force of Wills, but I think he'd like to be able to go, okay, Force of Will removing Brainstorm, next turn draw Ponder, have another blue card, Force of Will again, and have Pyroblast for backup.
It's also a bit of a hedge if Andrew leads off with a Duress or a Cabal Therapy. He can hide one of his Force of Wills with the Brainstorm, get it back the following turn.
Lotus Petal, the card drawn here for Tenjum. So he does have, a Petal. He's got a Dark Ritual. He's got a Cabal Ritual as well. Not a Threshold yet. Lotus Petals and the Dark Ritual will certainly help get there, but I'm not sure if he has the tools to be able to go off here. He's going to sacrifice Lotus Petal. Look like he's going to probably likely add black mana.
And keep in mind, we have Meddling Mage in play, shutting out Infernal Tutor, so Andrew cannot go down that road to try to go off here.
I'm not sure if he has a road to go down. Turtenwald going to sacrifice the Scalding Tarn. He might cast a Brainstorm now because he knows the top 2 cards of his deck. Volcanic Island is the land he's going to search for. wants to see a fresh 3 here with the Brainstorm. Looks like he's going to cast.
He would really like to find Spell Pierce here, if possible.
Yeah, Spell Pierce is great.
Anything that would allow him to keep Force of Will up while also constricting Andrew's development this turn.
I also kind of like this too because what this is it makes it seem like, okay, like I got to Brainstorm now because it looks like they're going to go for it. So he's kind of in a way like maybe masking. I mean, he did reveal Force of Will off of his Delver. So, you know, maybe he's trying to make it seem like, okay, I'm trying to mask how good my hand is. And that's what he's going to do. He's going to Force of Will the Dark Ritual, removing True Name Nemesis. And I think he has Force of Will blue card in his hand right now.
Yeah, he set up a different backup plan now.
Going to draw his card. It's a Meddling Mage. Going to attack for 5, put Tenjum down to 2. Probably deploy this Meddling Mage now if he wants to. I mean, he doesn't really have much of a reason to.
Yeah, he'd rather keep Daze plus Force of Will in hand.
Tenjum draws a Lion's Eye Diamond. I think he's stuck.
Certainly this Meddling Mage on Infernal Tutor is not helping matters. His hand appears to be just mana besides the Infernal Tutor, and there it is.
He's going to extend the hand, so Owen Turtenwald is going to win this match over Andrew Tenjum. 2 games to 0. Blue-White-Red Delver is going to move on over Ad Nauseam Tendrils.